It was the most shocking moment in British politics since the 1936 abdication, and those who witnessed it still cannot believe it. Prince William stood up in the middle of Keir Starmer's speech, stared at the Prime Minister as if looking at a traitor to the nation, and left without saying a word. The room froze. 2,000 Labour delegates stood like statues, unsure if what they were seeing was real or a live nightmare. But the truth is that Starmer had crossed a line that should never have been touched, and the entire United Kingdom realized it in that very moment. Minutes later, the monarchy itself confirmed what millions already suspected. The government had tried to interfere with the authority of the Crown, and William responded with the one weapon Starmer never imagined facing: the moral force of England's future king. The tension was so thick that journalists claimed they could feel the pressure in the air, and the first leaks made it clear. This crisis had the potential to bring down the government in less than 72 hours, and this is where it all begins. 3 days before this historic explosion, Starmer was already orchestrating behind the scenes an offensive that many classify as the biggest institutional attack on the modern monarchy. He deliberately chose the Queen Elizabeth II Centre, just meters from Parliament, as the stage for a speech that seemed innocent but hid a devastating threat. There, before an audience ready to applaud anything, Starmer planned to announce democratic reforms. But they were anything but democratic. His goal was simple and dangerous: to weaken any institution that did not bow before his government, including the monarchy, the House of Lords, and even centuries-old British tradition. When this plan reached Prince William's hands in a leaked secret document inside the palace, everything changed. The heir to the throne realized that if he stayed silent, he would allow Starmer to advance on pillars that had supported the country for centuries. And it was in that exact moment that William made the decision that would shake the United Kingdom to its core. At 11 o'clock that fateful morning, William put on his jacket, adjusted his tie, and told his aides, "I'm going, and I'm going as a citizen, not as a prince." This phrase, according to palace insiders, fell like a bomb. The monarchy never acts without calculation, and when it does, it is because something gravely serious threatens the country. William's attendance at the Labour event was not casual. It was a silent warning, a direct message to the Prime Minister that the Crown was watching every suspicious move. But few could imagine what was to come. As Starmer began his speech, William remained motionless, eyes fixed, expression neutral. But inside, aides report, he was holding back historic indignation. With every phrase about ancient institutions, with every insinuation that the monarchy needed to be reconsidered, the more attentive members of the audience noticed a detail. The future king did not blink. It was the silence before the storm. Then came the moment that would change the country's political destiny. Starmer, confident that William would remain passive as always, declared before live cameras, "If necessary, we will re-examine the constitutional role of the monarchy in modern Britain." These words were like a gunshot. People in the audience held their breath. Others put their hands to their mouths. Some began to applaud, until they realized what was happening. William froze. His expression changed instantly, and witnesses say they have never seen anything so intense. His face lost color, his jaw clenched, and his hands gripped the sides of the chair so hard his knuckles turned white. 47 seconds dragged on like an eternity. And then, without warning, William stood up. He did not ask permission, did not smile, did not hesitate. He looked directly at Starmer with a gaze that seemed to cut through the air, and simply walked out of the room, in front of the entire nation. The impact was immediate. 2,000 Labour delegates froze, unable to react. Starmer lost his breath, stumbled over his words, and for a few seconds seemed unsure whether to continue his speech or chase after the future king. A humiliating spectacle broadcast to millions. The live feed captured every detail of the panic that spread on stage. Desperate aides whispering, cameras trying to avoid showing the chaos, and confused delegates looking everywhere. But the worst was yet to come. Minutes later, internal circuit footage leaked to the press. William walking down the corridor, firm and determined, telling his personal security, "Make sure everyone knows. I left on purpose." This was a message. The video exploded on social media, and within minutes, the whole country understood that this was not just an exit. It was a declaration of institutional war. And as the palaces seethed, the streets began to catch fire, politically speaking. Thousands of elderly Britons, already crushed by Starmer's new austerity policies and brutal cuts, began to share their stories. A 72-year-old former nurse saying she has to skip meals. A 68-year-old widow living in the dark to save energy. An 81-year-old retired miner stating he would never vote Labour again after seeing the government attack the Queen's grandson. These real and painful testimonies became fuel for public outrage. While Starmer spoke of reforming the monarchy, people felt the weight of his decisions in their pockets, at their tables, and in their very dignity. The perception was clear. Starmer wanted to meddle with the one institution that still symbolized stability, while leaving millions of Britons suffering. This contrast sparked a national revolt. And then, something absolutely unprecedented happened. At 6:32 in the evening, just 4 hours after William's devastating gesture, King Charles appeared live on national television. No intermediaries, no spokespeople, no cold, calculated statement. It was him, before the cameras, with a serious look and a posture reminiscent of the tensest moments in British history. "The crown exists to serve the people," Charles said firmly, "to offer stability when some seek to divide the country." And then came the phrase that shook Westminster like an earthquake. "When the constitutional order is threatened, silence becomes complicity. We will not be complicit." Millions of Britons were hypnotized. Experts declared immediately, this was the most severe royal intervention since the 1936 abdication crisis. The message was crystal clear. The realm was in danger, and the monarchy would not stand idly by. The repercussion was immediate. Radio programs exploded with calls, newspapers began hastily redesigning their front pages, and international broadcasters interrupted their schedules to comment on the king's message. The entire United Kingdom realized that something enormous was happening. Inside the palace, sources say Charles rewrote his speech 7 times, removing diplomatic phrases and replacing them with direct warnings. So direct that they left aides in panic. But Charles remained unyielding. "I am not choosing sides. I am choosing Great Britain." This phrase resonated like thunder among veterans, conservatives, patriots, and ordinary citizens. Meanwhile, behind Starmer's back, the pressure mounted. Labour MPs began sending private messages, fearing that the Prime Minister had broken the last barrier and set the country on the path to irreversible institutional crisis. And before continuing, I need to ask you something important. If you support the monarchy, love this country, and are tired of Starmer's maneuvers against our institutions, then click subscribe now and leave a like. This helps immensely in bringing the truth that the mainstream media tries to hide to even more patriotic Britons like you. But the crisis, which already seemed enormous, was only beginning to show its true scale. Inside Westminster, desperation took hold of Starmer's cabinet. Ministers rushed to emergency meetings, aides were seen pacing with phones glued to their ears, and internal groups began secretly discussing whether the Prime Minister still had the capacity to remain in office. The pressure grew with every second. Sources close to the government revealed that some ministers begged Starmer to back down and request an immediate meeting with the king. But Starmer insisted he would not show weakness in the face of a royal provocation. The statement enraged even members of his own party. The growing perception was clear. Starmer had not understood the gravity of the situation, and insisting on confronting the monarchy could plunge the United Kingdom into the greatest institutional rupture of its modern era. The financial markets themselves began to react, with signs of instability emerging even before the next day's trading. Meanwhile, inside the palaces, the atmosphere was even more dramatic. Senior aides were divided, and the tension between Charles's and William's teams became evident. Half warned that any further step could turn a political crisis into an unprecedented institutional war. The other half argued that the monarchy would be destroyed if it remained silent in the face of a government trying to expand its powers at the expense of British tradition. And then came the moment that made everything explode. At 3:21 in the afternoon the next day, Kensington Palace released a statement that had not been vetted by Downing Street, something that simply does not happen in normal times. The text was short, direct, and devastating. The Prince of Wales would not accept any political request to suspend or alter his public engagements. A simple phrase, but with historic weight. The word political fell like a bomb, as it clearly exposed that there had been an attempt by the government to control or limit the actions of the heir to the throne. From that point on, the crisis was no longer veiled. It became explicit and open. By the way, comment below from which city, or even which country, you are watching this video. It's incredible to see how Britons from across the United Kingdom and around the world come together when our monarchy is under attack. The effect was instant and devastating. Downing Street collapsed internally, with staff trying unsuccessfully to prevent the press from interpreting the statement as a direct attack on the government. But it was already too late. Within minutes, all British newspapers, including the traditionally neutral ones, published headlines stating that the monarchy had been provoked, and that Prince William was reacting against unprecedented interference. Sources close to the government revealed that Starmer was furious, accusing the palace of politicizing the crown. But this attempt to reverse the narrative only made things worse. The public, especially the older and more patriotic, saw William's declaration as an act of courage, a defense of the country against a prime minister who seemed willing to rewrite the nation's foundation. On television, commentators compared the episode to institutional conflicts of the past, while conservative MPs discreetly celebrated the monarchy's firm stance. Starmer's political isolation grew with every minute. And then came the final blow, the leak that turned a political crisis into a national earthquake. A senior royal aide revealed to journalists that Starmer's request for William to suspend his public duties for months was not just strange, it was totally unprecedented in the modern history of the monarchy. No heir in any era had ever received such an extreme request from the government. The revelation hit like a missile on the Prime Minister's cabinet. The reaction was immediate. Spontaneous protests in several cities, veterans marching in support of the monarchy, and thousands of messages flooding social media demanding Starmer's resignation. In the corridors of Parliament, Labour MPs began to admit that the government was on the brink of losing control. This was the kind of crisis that could not be undone with speeches, because trust had been broken, and the country wanted answers. For the first time since taking office, Starmer appeared completely cornered, without allies and without a plan. As the political chaos intensified, it became clear to all that the United Kingdom was facing its greatest institutional rupture in nearly a century. The relationship between the monarchy and the government had turned into a minefield, and each new leak left Starmer even more isolated. Labour MPs began to publicly distance themselves, demanding explanations that the Prime Minister could not provide. Insider sources revealed that some ministers secretly considered the possibility of a collective resignation to force Starmer's fall before the crisis became irreversible. Meanwhile, William maintained his schedule as normal, visiting hospitals, attending public engagements, being greeted with applause wherever he went. Each appearance by the prince was interpreted as an act of resistance and stability, reinforcing the perception that the monarchy stood with the people while the government was trying to save itself. The battle was no longer institutional. It was emotional, national, and deeply symbolic. And it is precisely at this point that everything changes. Because now, what once seemed merely a political conflict has become a fundamental question about the future of the United Kingdom. Who truly represents the will and identity of the British people? Insiders guarantee there is even more explosive information behind this crisis. Documents, conversations, and pressures that reveal why Starmer tried to silence the heir to the throne for months. And these revelations, according to sources close to the crown, have the potential to redefine the country's constitutional balance forever. The United Kingdom is on the brink of a historic turning point, and the mood on the streets is one of growing expectation. On one side, a weakened government, shaken and unable to contain its own collapse. On the other, a strengthened monarchy, receiving massive support and seen as the last pillar of stability in a nation that feels betrayed. The inevitable question remains: when the full truth comes to light, and it will Starmer still have the capacity to remain as Prime Minister? The country is about to find out, and the impact could be simply overwhelming.